The topic I'm going to discuss today is Scottish Gaelic magazines in the 20th century. It has been the subject of my research for a couple of years now, so I will just try to share with you some of the interesting things that I have discovered. And if you have any questions or comments, I will do my best to answer them at the end. So I suppose this won't be news to anybody present, but just to make sure, Scotland is in a unique position in the sense that it has not just one historical minoritized language, but two. So if you know two possible candidates for a national language, one of them is Scots, a West Germanic language closely related to English, and Gaelic, which is a Celtic language closely related to Irish and Manx, more distantly to Breton, Cornish, and Welsh. So both these languages are minoritized. They have been subject to prejudice, and their situation is challenging and complex. And there have been people trying to support them, to make them more present in Scottish public life, and also to support new literature in them. And in my talk, I'm going to discuss several people who tried to support Gaelic in Scotland through establishing independent radical magazines. I really find this quote by Donald John MacLeod a great starting point. So in his dissertation on 20th century Gaelic literature, Donald John MacLeod wrote, "The three great periods of Gaelic prose writing are remarkably similar in several respects. At the center of each was one man or a very small nucleus of enthusiasts, usually motivated by nationalistic fervor. These men ran periodicals in which Gaelic was used for discussing the latest intellectual problems and in which the work of experimental writers of fiction was welcomed." So I will give you some examples of these people and of periodicals that they set up. Just to clarify, these periodicals were not the only ones. They did not exist in a vacuum. So they were running alongside the periodicals published by Uncommon Gaelach. At the same time, Anglophone periodicals were publishing their Gaelic sections. But I want to focus on these small independent magazines and on their radical vision for Gaelic in Scotland. These magazines often served as hubs of revivalist activity. There were publishing initiatives associated with them. They were organizing literary competitions. They were running Gaelic classes. So it wasn't just publishing periodicals. They were important because they give writers a platform to publish their work. They were also steering this new literature through reviews and critical essays. They also served as a platform for journalism, for discussing current affairs in Scotland, in the UK, and internationally, all through the medium of Gaelic. And by all this, they were advancing the language. So they were activating old registers of Gaelic that may have fallen out of use. They were redeploying vocabulary, and many authors were also coining new words so that they could discuss any subject through the medium of Gaelic. I've mentioned the associated activities already. And the first person I wanted to discuss is Erskine of Mar. Erskine is Val. Erskine was born rather unexpectedly in Brighton into an English-speaking family which had distant Scottish roots, and he was brought up in Edinburgh. He was very much a person on the move, so he would be spending time in Scotland. He had especially close links to Edinburgh and Aberdeenshire. He also spent a lot of time in England, especially in London, where he was part of the local Gaelic networks. He spent a couple of years in South Wales, and from the 1930s until the 1950s, he lived most of the time in France and only returned to the UK at the end of his life. As you can see from his dates, he had a remarkably long life and a very productive one. Rory Erskine underwent a process of self-invention. So he became committed to Scottish politics. He was very much involved in the movement for Scottish independence. He learned Gaelic to an impressive degree of fluency. He changed his name to Rory Erskine Isvar to reflect that commitment. and he also converted to Catholicism. Throughout his life, he was involved in journalism and in politics. He wrote prolifically in English, reviews, essays, biographies, treatises on history and politics. But what is especially pertinent for us is that he is one of the first prominent new users of Gaelic who chose it as their literary medium. And he became a prolific Gaelic writer of essays, short stories, experimental plays, and he also translated from Gaelic into English. And what is interesting here is that he was mostly translating works of his contemporaries, so not his own writing, but the work of other people to make it more accessible to a wide readership. I really like this appreciation of Rory Erskine from the pen of Angus Henderson, Anus MacKenzie, who was a prolific Gaelic journalist and one of Erskine's closest collaborators. And this is how he introduces Erskine in an article for the Celtic Annual. Few persons labour more sedulously and unremittingly in the interests of Gaelic letters and Scottish nationalism than the Honourable Rory Erskine of Mar. For the furtherance of these objects, he gives liberally of his time and talents, and frequently risks much hard cash, and with characteristic modesty, he never lays himself out to win popular commendation or applause. He detests the big drum and consistently shuns the limelight. He is scarcely ever seen on public platforms, nor is his voice ever heard in the councils of worthy politicians. Yet in matters relating to Gaelic literature and Scottish politics, he is a power to be reckoned with, and he exercises an influence that extends to the uttermost limits of Gaeldom. Possessed of a discerning and logical mind, he is fertile in practical and original ideas and wields a graceful, vigorous, and convincing pen. I think it's a delightful piece, but it also shows that Erskine was able to find allies and collaborators among traditional native Gaelic speakers like Henderson himself, and that he indeed sought not to promote himself and his personality, but the causes that he was interested in. And watch out for the word vigorous is going to be an important one. So to promote Gaelic and to support Scottish independence, Erskine started several magazines. The traditional corpus includes 5 of them. As you can see on the slide, they all had Gaelic titles. The earliest one was a monthly Unbarred, the poet. It was bilingual and it appeared relatively briefly. The second venture was a more lasting one, Guna Brianna, the Voice of the Year, which was quarterly. And it was initially bilingual and later to switch to Gaelic only, but it also published content in Breton, Irish, Manx, French, and Latin, and also a poem in Scots. And the quarterly was indeed a more viable format because it still gave Erskine and his team the chance to comment on current affairs when they were still fresh, but it also gave him time enough to assemble the required content with a relatively small team of regular contributors. Another venture that Erskine set up was a weekly newspaper, Alba, Scotland, which for the first time appeared for 1 year between 1908 and 1909, and it was later revived in 1921, and then it became a monthly. This was quite a radical experimental thing to do because Erskine and his collaborators, they were trying to produce the newspaper on a weekly basis. So that took a lot of work and organization, and it didn't last for very long, but it was a very important effort in terms of discussing current affairs through the medium of Gaelic, and it was all in Gaelic, apart from some content taken over from Irish periodicals. All these periodicals were quite intellectual and serious, and to attract a broad readership, Erskine set up as a lighter companion to them, and Skelige, the storyteller, which was initially a monthly, then a quarterly, and it appeared in Gaelic only, and it was focusing on short fiction, folk tales, songs, translations from other languages. And finally, The last venture was on Roserna, the Rose Garden, which was an annual. It appeared 4 times. It was again Gaelic only, and it was beautifully produced. So it was also an artistic venture. So these 5 are the traditional corpus of Erskine's magazines. But in my work, I decided to add 2 more because Erskine was also running these 2 periodicals that had English titles, the Scottish Review, which was a quarterly that Erskine revived, and the Pictish Review, which was the monthly that he set up in collaboration with Hugh McDermott. And although these 2 were predominantly Anglophone, they were also publishing original Gaelic writing, translations from Gaelic into English, and articles on Gaelic topics. There are substantial overlaps between these 2 and the core Gaelic periodicals, and also the same group of regular loyal contributors. And the interesting difference is that these 2, the Scottish Review and the Pictish Review, published much more original content in Scots, so Scotland's other historical minoritized language. If you would like to explore these periodicals in more detail after the session, please feel free to visit this website, erskine.glasgow.ac.uk. It is based on my Marie Curie Fellowship, which I conducted at the University of Glasgow. And the bilingual website gives you the chance to browse through the magazines according to years and individual issues. You can browse through the list of contributors, which is still growing. You can explore them according to places, read through individual topics. The website also gives you a list of resources, so I hope this is going to be useful for the public and for fellow researchers. And at the moment, the National Library of Scotland in Edinburgh is carrying out a digitization project. So the 5 Gaelic magazines will hopefully soon be available online. And I hope that that's going to attract even more interest to them. Just to give you an idea about the reach and reception of these periodicals, and also because they are very funny, some of them, I wanted to share with you these press notices for Gunabliana, which Rory Erskine included in the 2nd volume. So first we have Ancleusolish, which was an important Irish language periodical, saying that Gunabliana is singularly interesting, maintains its high reputation for learning and scholarship. Then we have, for instance, Aberdeen Journal, praising it as a vigorous and bright periodical. We have Rosé Chronicle saying just vigorous. The Montreal Gazette cannot do without Gunabliana. Then the advertiser says, just very interesting. One of my favorite ones is Catholic Herald, saying that it is redolent of Celtic buoyancy and vigor of style. I think that's amazing. And then we have Manchester Guardian, which finds Gunabliana as stimulating as a glass of Highland Stingle on Ben Macquarie. So I think these are just delightful, but they also show you that Erskine's periodicals were being read and discussed not only in Scotland and in different parts of Scotland and that, but also in Ireland, in England, and overseas in Canada. And I will be mentioning more about that in a minute. I mentioned that especially Andro Cernach was also an artistic venture, and I just wanted to show you briefly one title page, one decorated opening page of an essay, and one original illustration by Stuart Carmichael, who was a Scottish painter and one of Erskine's regular collaborators. So you see that Erskine was paying a lot of attention to the production values, to the typesetting, to the visual presentation. And if you would like to find out more about this dimension of the magazines, please visit the website. And there is a list of all the contributing artists, their works, and more information about that. In terms of promoting new Gaelic literature, Erskine's magazines were publishing Gaelic poetry, both traditional and modern. And I think this overlap between a very traditional content rooted in Gaelic communities and of more innovative poetry is quite remarkable. Again, if you would like to find out more and explore the poets who were involved in the magazines, please follow the link to the website, which gives you a full overview of the contributions in terms of poetry. But where they were most innovative was the promotion of Gaelic fiction and Gaelic drama. So just to contextualize this, in comparison with the trajectories of other national literatures, the outset of Gaelic fiction, both the short story and the novel, is relatively late, and Erskine and his collaborators were programmatically supporting new Gaelic fiction. Erskine himself was writing short stories. And my favorite example is a series of detective tales featuring the investigation agent John McRonald, who is having different adventures in the noble houses of his friends. He also goes to fight the nihilists in Russia. And Erskine wrote this series, inspired, of course, by Arthur Conan Doyle and his Sherlock Holmes. He wrote it all in Gaelic to prove the language was flexible enough, and also to make Gaelic literature more competitive, because it was already facing this huge competition of popular reading available in English. And throughout the 20th century, we see these attempts to make Gaelic more competitive and to encourage reading for pleasure in Gaelic. If you are at all attracted to detective fiction in Gaelic, I have translated some extracts from Erskine's detective stories for this article. And with Professor Marie Watson from Aberdeen, we also hope to produce a new edition of Erskine's detective tales bilingually. So hopefully it's going to happen sometime soon. Erskine's periodicals were also instrumental in the emergence of the first two Gaelic novels, and their authors, John McCormick and Angus Robertson, were both regular and prolific contributors to the magazine. And sections from Robertson's novel Antoga Moe were first serialized in Anskerige. And you can see the cover of the first edition on the left of the slide. Another particular concern for Erskine and his collaborators was the unused potential of drama for the Gaelic Revival. And in order to promote it and to give it a programmatic direction, Erskine wrote a series of essays for Gunabriana on the subject of Gaelic drama. And in one of them, he says, the artistic and propagandist value of the stage has not been realized with that quickness of perception which its signal merits in these respects emphatically invite, and which one would naturally expect to be discovered on the part of those who are more or less prominently identified with the Gaelic cause and have its conduct largely in their hands. So Erskine and other people around him, they felt that drama had much more potential for the Gaelic Revival because of its community dimension and its suitability for discussing political topics. So they were trying to encourage more Gaelic drama. Erskine in Gunabriana ran a competition for a new play on the topic of Macbeth, which was meant to be more historically accurate than Shakespeare. Unfortunately, they did not receive any submissions, which is regrettable. But the magazines did publish new Gaelic plays in their entirety, especially innovative plays on topics from Scottish history by Donald Sinclair, Dolmach na Ceartich, who was a prolific poet and playwright from Barra. And the magazines also published Erskine's own experiments with symbolist drama in Gaelic, so drama inspired by Belgian symbolism, Maurice Maeterlinck, and by these developments on the European continent. Again, if this is something that interests you, you can follow the link to the website and you will find the full list of all the plays published in the magazines and of essays and reviews concerning Gaelic drama. From what I have said up to now, it seems that Erskine's periodic was very, very serious, intellectual, highbrow, and they indeed were. And that's why I find it very interesting that they were also publishing a substantial amount of content for children and essays and articles concerning education. and because of their concern with the future of Gaelic in Scotland and their commitment to contribute to its development, they saw this as a vital concern to support these new generations of Gaelic users. So in terms of content for children, they published mostly retellings of folk tales, but also original plays that were aimed at young readers and actors. One by Dolmach Nakiartig, another one by Katrina Nichkelerein Grant, Catherine White Grant, who was a prolific woman writer and traveler. And these plays were meant to be used actively in schools and in communities, and to encourage children and young people to use Gaelic in their daily life and to have some fun while doing it. As a beginning foil to the more innovative and experimental content, I also wanted to mention the magazine's engagement with folklore material because they were, as part of their effort to cater to the tastes of broad readership, they were publishing traditional songs and folk tales, also essays on folklore, including contributions by leading scholars in the field. And what I would like to single out in particular is that they served as a platform for bringing out and making available unpublished material from the manuscripts of John Francis Campbell and Frangan Campbell, who was one of the most influential collectors and editors of Gaelic folklore in the second half of the 19th century. And he is the editor of the 4-volume Popular Tales of the West Highlands. If you haven't come across those books, they're absolutely wonderful. I recommend them very much. Campbell, as you can see on the slide, was also a talented artist. So he made these delightful drawings inspired by motifs from Gaelic folklore. And if you would like to learn more about this particular dimension of the magazines, again, the website gives you, all the information and some additional resources. One topic which I thought would be of special interest for this international series is translation, because Erskine and the writers around him saw translation as an opportunity to provide Gaelic literature with new impulses, to forge new links, or to strengthen existing ones with other literatures and cultures. Very often translations would be overlapping with other agendas of the magazines in terms of politics and causes. And while some translators were definitely working from originals, others were using existing bridge translations into other languages. If you would like to see the full list of translated content in the periodicals, again, the website is there to help, and it is quite a staggering array in terms of languages and authors. But just to give you a couple of examples, Erskine's contributors were translating from Russian, from French, from Spanish. There is a lot of translated poetry from English, also from Breton, reflecting the links to our fellow Celtic countries. But for this particular occasion, I wanted to point out the translations from German, specifically from the poetry of Ludwig Uhland, the German poet, philologist, and lawyer. And these were translated into Scottish Gaelic by Hugh Lang, who was originally from South Uist and spent most of his life in Australia. And he was a brilliant linguist and a prolific translator from a number of languages into Gaelic, including German, English, Latin, and other languages. And I mentioned Erskine's own translations as well. And as I said, he was mostly translating from Gaelic into English, and the works of his colleagues and friends and collaborators, including John McCormick and Donald Sinclair. In terms of reach, I mentioned something about the networks the magazines were tapping into in Scotland, but their reach was much broader and indeed global, because they were deliberately trying to cater for the increasingly scattered, but also increasingly global Gaelic community. and they served as a means of connecting Gaelic users overseas. So people who went abroad and settled in British colonies as colonial settlers, and between Gaelic initiatives in Scotland and in London. So the magazines were regularly covering topics related to Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, and they featured contributions by writers settled in these parts of the world, including original writing and letters. On the slide, you can see a letter from Angus Cameron Robertson, who was originally from Skye, but settled in New Zealand and became very active in Gaelic and Scottish cultural initiatives there. If you would like to find out more about this, you can explore these different places and writers who were based there through these links. I mentioned the interest in fellow Celtic countries, and Erskine's magazines were chiefly engaging with Ireland and with Brittany, to a lesser extent also with Wales, Cornwall, and the Isle of Man. They featured contributors from these individual countries, content in other Celtic languages, untranslated, and they regularly covered topics concerning these countries, and this would be both Erskine himself and his colleagues. And many of these people were involved in pan-Celtic initiatives, would be attending pan-Celtic congresses. They were maintaining correspondence with their colleagues in Ireland, Brittany, and other places. On the slide, you can see a short report on the developments in the Isle of Man by Mona Douglas, who was one of the most influential promoters of Manx in the 20th century. This slide, you can see original contributions in Breton and also in Welsh. And I think this pan-Celtic dimension of the magazines is very important. And it is quite astonishing to see all this untranslated content side by side. Just to give you an example of the range of these pan-Celtic networks, these are just selected contributors to Erskine's magazines with links to Ireland. You can find the full list on the website. And as you can see, these are some leading personalities of Irish literature and politics, including Douglas Hyde, who of course became the first president of Ireland, but he was also a folklore scholar. So that's what he contributed to Erskine's magazines. You see William McNeill, Patrick Pearse, George Sigerson, so many people who were involved in the struggle for Irish independence, and many of whom came to hold high offices of state in independent Ireland. Speaking about Ireland and international connections, one person whom I wanted to mention at this particular occasion is Kuno Meyer, German scholar born in Hamburg, a leading specialist in Celtic philology and literature. In his time, Meyer had particularly strong links to Ireland. He was very close to Douglas Hyde, but he also had strong links to Scotland, and he was a lecturer in Celtic at the University of Glasgow for 3 years. If you would like to find out more about his years at Glasgow and about his influence, please do visit the wonderful website Scialna Gaelic Glasgow, the Gaelic story at the University of Glasgow, which gives you a lot of detail and photographs. Meyer was an important person for Erskine and the contributors to his magazines. Although he did not contribute directly, he is constantly referred to. His opinions and activities are invoked. Again, you can follow the link to the website to find out more about his interactions with Erskine and his circle. Meyer was also an important presence at the Pan-Celtic Congress in Dublin in August 1901. On the slide, you can see the program of the Congress and a detailed report about the event, which was published in the magazine Celtia. Meyer's lecture on the present state of Celtic countries is hailed as one of the most important events of the week. So I think it's quite remarkable to see a scholar of German origin being so well linked in Scotland and in Ireland. My impression is that Mayer's career and his influence has been overshadowed by politics, because after the outbreak of the First World War, he was still supportive of Germany, and that led to some backlash, both in the United States, where he was meant to be a visiting professor, also in the UK and in Ireland. So hopefully there will be more engagement with him in the future, but his Scottish colleagues and friends were very loyal to him even afterwards. Erskine published an appreciative obituary after his passing. So I just wanted to share this with you, this remarkable German-Scottish connection. And now moving on from Erskine to people who followed after him and whom he inspired, writing about Erskine for the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography. Derick Thomson, I will say more about him in a minute, points out that although Rory Erskine's Gaelic publishing work was not very successful in a commercial sense, it had a positive influence on Gaelic writers and helped to lay the foundations for the resurgence in Gaelic writing in fiction, poetry, and journalism, which was to come when he had retired from active work in this field. And one of the ventures that were directly inspired by Erskine's periodicals was the quarterly Gaelic, founded in 1951. If you remember what I was saying about the wonderful achievement of Erskine's Gunabliana running for 21 years, which is no mean feat for a small magazine, here we have Gaelic appearing regularly for 50 years. So it was indeed a major force in Gaelic literature and culture in the second half of the 20th century. It was founded by Derick Thomson, Rory McComish, and Finlay J. MacDonald, Fiona Liang Magol. And very much like Erskine's magazines before them, they wanted to support Gaelic and promote Scottish independence, but they also wanted to make Gaelic appealing to a white readership and to encourage the use of Gaelic in daily life and in different fields. And they were, like Erskine before them, publishing modern experimental literature, but also more traditional content. In Gaelic, we see a consistent interest in fellow Celtic countries, in Europe and in the world, openness to new users of Gaelic, both from Scotland and from abroad. And this, I think, very appealing vision of multilingual Scotland, where Gaelic and Scots are equally supported according to their particular needs, and which is also welcoming to other languages and traditions. I mentioned that there is a direct link between Erskine's ventures and Gaelic, and this is the proof coming from the co-founders and co-editors of Gaelic themselves, and they published this in the 16th issue in 1956, and this is my own translation from the Gaelic original. The other day we visited an old hero who in his time did much for Gaelic, the man who in a way gave us the courage to establish Gaelic. He is now back in London and talks about buying a house in Scotland. His heart has always been in this country, and he remains certain that we will not achieve success and prosperity unless we separate ourselves from England. Rory Erskine of Mar is now 87 years old, and the upcoming generation does not know him. Magazines that did not receive the help from the readers that they deserved are now much sought after every time a library is being sold. So I think that's quite a moving account. You can also see a photograph of Erskine in his late 80s when they visited him, and their motivation to start a new Gaelic periodically was partly coming from the fact that there was a major gap in terms of independent Gaelic periodical press after Rory Erskine ceased to be active in the field. So now something about the two people who were responsible for Gaelic. The first one is Rory McCormish Derick Thomson, originally from Lewis in the Outer Hebrides, brought up in a Gaelic-speaking family. Interestingly, his father, James Thomson, Seamus McCormish, was himself a Gaelic poet and scholar, and one of the contributors to Erskine's Guna Brianna and Rosernach. So, that's an additional link between the two. Thomson became one of the most influential modern Gaelic poets. He was also an acclaimed scholar, professor of Gaelic at the University of Glasgow for 30 years. And again, in his very long and productive life, he committed himself to promoting Gaelic as a poet, academic, translator, editor, publisher, and activist. He was crucially involved in the foundation of the Gaelic Books Council. And he was also politically active, supporting the Scottish National Party, the SNP, from the 1930s, so even from his teenage years. And he was also active in local campaigns in the 1970s. And he's the person who chaired the working group that prepared the SNP Gaelic policy, which was later published in Garum. And I mentioned this vision of multilingual Scotland. Derick Thomson had throughout his life a growing interest in Scots language and literature, and he helped to foster many new connections in terms of research and translation between the two. The other person responsible for Garum is Finlay J. MacDonald, from Harris in the Outer Hebrides. MacDonald was very famous as a broadcaster, producer, and filmmaker. He became an influential figure in the Scottish BBC. Nowadays, he's mostly remembered for his autobiographical writings in English, 3 delightful books that deal with his upbringing in the Outer Hebrides between the First World War and the Second World War. But he's also an amazing writer in Gaelic of short stories, humorous prose, travelogues, and journalism. If you would like to learn something about MacDonald as a filmmaker, he was known by his contemporaries as Fellini MacDonald. Please do visit the website, which is run by his family, where you can get some clips from his films. To give you a sense of what Garum looked like on the page, and also of its diversity in terms of content. On the slide, you can see a Gaelic crossword prepared by Derick Thomson himself. In the middle, an article about Brittany by Per Dennis, one of the leading Breton scholars and linguists who spent some time in Aberdeen, and finally a fashion page, to prove that every subject imaginable can be discussed through the medium of Gaelic. But what, again, I would like to focus on is how Garum helped to promote new Gaelic literature and culture. Like Erskine's magazines before, the editors of Garum were very interested in promoting Gaelic fiction, especially the short story. And it is mostly thanks to Garum that the Gaelic short story became such a wonderfully diverse genre from the 1950s onwards. This is the beginning of the short story in Gaelic in the modern sense. So as opposed to traditional folk tales, these are short stories that focus on the psychology of characters and on particular isolated episodes. To encourage more Gaelic writers to experiment with the short story format, Garum was running short story competitions, and they also gave writers the chance to have their short story collections published through Garum publications. So this is going back to my comment about Gaelic periodicals as hubs of revivalist activity. Garum was also publishing poetry, again, both traditional and modern. In it, we see free verse consistently used in Gaelic. The works of the so-called famous 5 of modern Gaelic poetry appeared on its pages, including the poetry of Sorley MacLean and the emblematic poem of the 20th century Gaelic literature, Halleck, appeared in Garum for the first time. Gerem also provided opportunities for new generations of Gaelic poets, including Christopher White, Meg Bateman, Anna Frater, Rudy Gorman, and very often the debut collections of these talented poets were published through Gerem publications. So the magazine gave the writers a chance to publish in its issues. Gerem was also publishing reviews of new works emerging in Gaelic, and then through Gerem publications, they had the chance to publish books of their own. Women contributors, have been rather scarce in my talk so far, and although Erskine involved some important women writers and translators in his magazines, they were not very numerous. This changes with Gerem in the second half of the 20th century. Thomson and MacDonald were encouraging more women to write in Gaelic and to publish their work in Gerem, and since the earliest years, the quarterly had women reviewers, women poets, short story writers, translators, cartoonists. Just to give you a few names, Martina Mackenzie, Murtaknich Konich, was both a reviewer and a translator. On the slide, you can see her Gaelic translation of a poem by Robert Burns. Chrissy Dick, Caristhiona Dick, took care of the section for children, but also contributed her own short stories. Ailey Watt, one of the most versatile and prolific short story writers, had her major opportunities in Gerem, and the list goes on with Meg Bateman and Frater. So I think this consistent support of women contributors is something very important about Gerem. To continue what I started in the first part of the talk on Erskine's periodicals, Gerem was again very interested in publishing translations from other languages into Gaelic. The list is indeed amazing, ranging from classical languages, Latin, Greek, to Celtic languages, Irish, Welsh, Breton, to big European languages, English, Italian, Spanish, to small and minoritized languages, including Maltese, Polish, Ukrainian, Hungarian. So it is quite a staggering array. Some of these were translated directly into Gaelic, others were probably done through bridge translations, but much more research is required to establish that with certainty. And these translations were often accompanied by articles about the languages and countries. And naturally, the writers and translators were especially curious about minoritized languages, about multilingual countries, and the way they support the languages in their territory. But I wanted to give you some examples of translations done from German into Gaelic. So you see the names on the slide. Christopher White, translated from Edward Merike. Two translators were interested in Bertolt Brecht, and there were more included in this anthology of European poetry in Gaelic, Bardach Naroniorpa and Gaelic, edited by Derick Thomson, published in 1990, and the volume brought together many of the translations from European languages into Gaelic that appeared in Gerem over the years, and also some new ones. So if you would like to read some Rilke in German, there is a delightful translation of Herbst into Gaelic by Derick Thomson himself. Thomson was a gifted linguist and a wonderful translator. So that's a chance to enjoy this, this area of his work. And I mentioned the support and opportunities that Gerem was offering to new users of Gaelic, so people who came to the language as learners, who decided to learn it and be creatively active in it. Many of them came from Scotland or from Anglophone countries, including Gervin Mackay, Norman Burns, Christopher White, whom I've mentioned already, Charles Coventry, Dennis King, but other users of Gaelic came from more exotic countries, including Mavis Fraser-Radkever from the Netherlands, Rosaline de Gasquet from France, Michael Madek from Brittany, and I was delighted to find one new user of Gaelic from German-speaking countries, Hans Weber from Switzerland, who published a 4-part essay about Switzerland and its multilingual realities. At the moment, I don't know a lot about Hans Weber as a person, so if anybody has information, I would be delighted to receive it, and I intend to do more research about him. If you would like to explore Gaelic more for yourself, I recommend this wonderful online resource, Gaelic Online, Gaelic Erloine, which is a project run by the Digital Archive of Scottish Gaelic at the University of Glasgow, and it gives you the chance to search all the issues of Gaelic according to topics, contributors, places. It's all for free, and the website also features several scanned early issues of Gaelic, so you can browse through them, read them, enjoy them, and hopefully the full run of Gaelic is going to be digitized in the future too. So just to wrap up and conclude, what I tried to illustrate, that these independent magazines had a decisive impact on Gaelic literature, and that they laid influential blueprints for following initiatives. They were remarkable for combining support for Scottish political independence, cultural nationalism, and language revival. They were promoting new Gaelic literature, and supporting it through rigorous and sophisticated literary criticism, essays, and reviews. They were interestingly combining high cultural standards and ideals with a pragmatic and business-like approach, so trying to attract a wide readership, trying to make the magazine sell, which was both pragmatic and important in terms of promoting the language and getting the message across to as many people as possible in Scotland and abroad. They had a distinctly cosmopolitan outlook, and were always looking for international inspirations. What I find is especially important also nowadays is that they were very open to people who came to Gaelic from the outside and decided to learn it and be active in it. So this is all from me for today. We